All right. So I think that there were a few technical issues here earlier, but we'll start again because we actually have not missed all that much. So just a very brief introduction again. My name is Luan. I'm in Cape Town, South Africa, and I'll be doing today's webinar all about the wonderful world of online teaching. I've also said hello to everybody who's come in. You might not have heard, but I've greeted you by name. I know that we've got people from Canada, we've got people from Japan, we have people from Ireland. It's amazing, amazing to see you all. All right, so as mentioned earlier, and as some of you might not have heard, the webinar today is all about online teaching. And it's a wonderful world because it's something that has just blown up in the past year or so. We've always known about it, but of course, it's become something that's become an option for so many people, more so after certain things like COVID. So today we're going to be discussing a few key factors in teaching online. All right, the very first thing that we're going to be talking about is why. Why to teach English online? What's in it for us as teachers? And the very next thing is how. How to teach English online. What does it entail? What makes it fun? What makes it interesting? And what makes it a choice for so many people out there? And then, of course, things to think about, things to consider before deciding whether this is an option for you. And then also a few tips for teaching English online. And then, of course, as usual, at the end of every webinar, we have a Q&A where you, of course, can ask, I'll do the answering, but ask all those pertinent questions that you might have. So what I want you to do, and remember, please, is that if you've got any important questions, save them for the end of the webinar because that's when I can access them. If you type them too early on, I might just miss them. And believe me, we want to answer every single question that you may have. Right, so let's get straight into it. We've covered what we're going to cover. We might as well get straight into it. So the very first thing is why. Why do we teach English online? So as mentioned earlier, there's been a dramatic increase in online learning and particularly online English learning. And just this year, the market has seen a growth, a month-on-month growth of 15%. Now that's a lot. And we're talking about a market of worth over 8.4 billion euros in 2021. And if things have grown since then, those numbers are substantially bigger. So if you think about this dramatic increase in online learning in general, and in English English language learning in particular, there's a lot to discuss today. And also this growth has got a lot to do with COVID. So, the world has changed, the world has shifted, the way people learn, the way people study, this has all shifted. And yes, it has a lot to do with COVID, but of course we grow, we learn, and we develop as things happen. And then also another reason we do this is for that flexible living and working. So I can feel a lot of you saying, yes, there it is. English online is the ultimate in flexible living. You can be in control to a certain extent, of course, of when and where you work. You can be a digital nomad. There are no restrictions of where you can live. If you want to work from home, close to friends and family, you can do that. However, if you want to bounce around and travel to a different country every month, well, yes, you can do that too. And that's the good news for so many of us. All right, so when it comes to how, of course, lots of you have maybe tried this before, others have not. So this is brand new information. And this is something that I had to learn as I went along because I teach English online and I love every minute of it. But of course, there were teething stages. There were stages where I had to really do my homework and find out as much information as I could as possible. So there are a few different ways you can teach English online. We will look at two of the main options. The first one is that you can work for a company. Firstly, working for a company would involve signing up with one of the hundreds of online teaching companies. And if you're accepted as a teacher, you simply wait for students to book lessons with you. So this is definitely one option. And the fact that you can sign up with many the work comes pouring in. Of course, there are some schools with contracts where you can only be with one school, but until you've secured a job as a teacher, you can absolutely sign up with as many companies as you wish. So to be employed as a teacher for these companies, you'll need to make sure that you satisfy their entry requirements. And you will likely need to do a demo lesson. So FYI, watch our webinar on making those demo videos and doing those demo lessons. Lots and lots of interesting stuff there too. But anyway, once you've been accepted into the company, students then can book lessons with you. The company will take into consideration your schedule, they'll keep track of your schedule, and they'll pay you at the end of every second week or at the end of every month. This might differ slightly from company to company, so find out, see what works for you, and see if it's something that you can actually incorporate into your financial situation. And then also, your students will provide feedback after your lessons. And this is what will help you retain students or potentially get more students, as well as earn rewards and bonuses that the company might have set up. If you do your research and find that the hourly teaching rate is lower than you expected, don't forget that there are many different, very easy ways to get bonuses, like being punctual, providing good feedback, being reliable. Students take all that into consideration. I know teachers who are securing more and more work just based on those little reviews that students leave for you. So being punctual, being reliable, giving the best you can in those online lessons, even if the hourly rate is low, they absolutely do pay off. And then the other way of teaching online. So remember, we've spoken about working for a company. So the other way of teaching online is being completely independent. So I will admit, at the beginning of my journey, I was working with a couple of different companies. And this was great because they sent my students to me. But as you go along and as you become more experienced and seasoned in this field, you can very often secure clients and students on your own. And that would end up in you working as an independent teacher. So not working with a particular company, but being independent. To do this, you do not sign up with the company, but you market yourself. You can create a website advertising your services, or use websites like LinkedIn and Gumtree. You'll find that you need to put some energy into marketing yourself so that potential students can find you online and also reach out to you for lessons. Several teaching sites allow you to upload a demo video to advertise yourself to students. And these are often known as marketplace sites, and they are essentially a platform. Students contact you through the website, and the site keeps track of your schedule and your lessons. And they earn their money by taking a commission from your earnings, and usually it's not too much. So the benefits of being an independent online teacher are that you can set your rates of pay for invoicing, chasing payments, and all other admin that comes with being a freelancer. So many companies also provide a curriculum and lesson plans, which here you'll have to maybe do yourself if you are independent. So as you can see, there are some pros and cons of being independent, as the same with being with a particular company. So just to summarize, being with a company, students usually get sent your way. It's very much dependent on their reviews as to whether you retain those students or acquire more clients. Very often working with a company, you get the curriculum. Being independent, you have to source your own clients, market yourself, but you call your rates and you write the schedule. So pros and cons for you to weigh up. And very often teachers, tend to go one way or the other, and some of them tend to blend the two. And it's absolutely all right. As long as you don't poach students from the company that you work for, you're good. All right. So when it comes to things that we need to think about, of course, teachers, we're planning careers, we're always thinking. So when you need to consider points like time zones, keep in mind the different time zones between where you are and where your students are. It's not the ideal situation to be teaching at 3 a.m., for example, unless you're a night owl and that's what you do. I know I couldn't. So I'm very, very careful about students that I sign up with. If the students are more or less in the same time zone as me, great. Couple of hours out here and there, not a problem. If, however, it requires me being up at 3 a.m., not going to happen. Also, visas. Make sure that you're allowed to work where you want to go. While visa laws are quite relaxed when it comes to working online, you will still need some sort of visa to be in a country for an extended amount of time. Look into the digital nomad visa to see if it can, in fact, help you out. Another thing to consider, because remember, yes, we're talking about teaching online, but we're talking about teaching online from anywhere in the world. So another thing you need to consider is the cost of living. These days, a very important factor to take into consideration. So traveling the world is great, but some countries are a lot more expensive to live in than others. If you're earning US dollars, for example, living in the UK or in the EU can still be quite pricey. So make sure you are earning enough to justify living there. A better option is to live somewhere where the cost of living is low and take holidays in the more expensive destinations. Also, another one to consider, stuff, luggage, things that move with you. Moving around while teaching means you need to become a packing expert. I'm not, I'm getting there. But you need to be able to pack your entire classroom into a suitcase to make your life as easy as possible. So be smart when choosing which items you need to pack. Pack wisely. People say pack light, but with teachers, I don't know about you, but as a teacher, I've got a bag with me, and that bag has got loads of stuff, markers, color papers, flashcards. So good luck with that. Work on it as I am. And then the next point that you need to consider is connectivity. The most important consideration when teaching online while traveling is your connectivity. If you're staying on someone's couch or in a hostel or in an Airbnb, you need to make sure that you have reliable and fast internet connection wherever you are. Plus, you need to have adequate power for your classroom setup for the duration of your lessons. I think about us here in South Africa with something called load shedding, where we have power cuts for 2 hours, sometimes 4 hours. So, as an online teacher, I'm sorted. I have power banks, I have Wi Fi routers that keep going even when we don't have electricity. So, those are a few things you might have to take into consideration wherever you are in the world. And then also a quiet place. Teaching English online from home or from your own space means that you need to make sure that you have a quiet environment for your lessons. If you're traveling, this can be more challenging. The easiest solution is to book private rooms wherever you go, but you also need to make sure that there's no noise from traffic or construction, pets near you. So invest in a good set of noise cancelling headphones. I'm not using them today because I generally have quite a nice quiet space here, but they do help in situations where life and noise take over. Right. So the next thing that you need to consider, and for me, this is a world that has recently opened up because before we used to use one or two platforms. These days, there are so many available. So obviously, the next thing we're talking about is choosing your platform and your tools. So Google Classroom, Moodle, Canvas, Edmodo, Blackboard. Before you start, you'll need to decide on a platform to deliver your online lesson. So LMS, they are designed to help an individual to develop, manage, and provide online lessons and programs to learn. It provides a platform for your students and instructions to learn and highlight their skills wherever and whenever they want as per their convenience. Other factors or other things to consider are platforms like Zoom, Skype, Google Meet, MS Teams, Microsoft Teams. Try a few and see what works for you. That's exactly what I did. So many of them have free trials, or they have unpaid plans where you have very few students, limited time, but you at least then have the luxury of trying these for free. So these have interactive whiteboards, breakout rooms, screen sharing functionality, file sharing, and these are great options to use to make your lessons more interactive and more interesting. So look at free and paid for plans. Some are not specifically designed for teaching, so take that into consideration also. Also, Canva, Kahoot, Quizlet, Padlet. As an online English teacher, setting up a fun-filled yet organized virtual classroom may be challenging, but tools can help. You can take advantage of interactive apps that make it easy for you to generate your own quizzes and convert them into fun challenges for your students. I remember at the beginning of the process that I had a blackout function and I would put a picture on the board, black it out, and student I would reveal, and my students would have to guess what they saw. That would be a warmer, done and dusted in a couple of minutes. They'd be intrigued, they'd be engaged, and the picture would obviously set the context for the rest of the lesson. So there are ways to make the lesson challenging, fun, and interesting for your students. All right, so the next thing we're going to look at is setting up your teaching environment. So when I started interviewing for online teaching positions, because remember I said to you at the beginning of my journey, I worked with companies. I worked with companies who gave me students, who gave me a curriculum, who gave me the platforms I required. And that's something to consider as well. Some companies, some schools, they don't require for you to have Zoom or Skype or anything like that. They have their own platforms. So also take that into consideration. But here, right now, we're talking about your tangible English teaching environment. And the very first thing that you need to think about, you'll need to make sure that you have all the requirements, whether it's from your home that you're teaching or office or some beautiful remote location. You'll want to have the following. So the very first thing, of course, a PC, a laptop. Some people use other devices with a camera that's capable of running a variety of software. Tablets are an option, but may not have the full functionality of a laptop, for example. The next thing, a fast internet connection that allows you to video call without interruption. The kind of situation where when you're opening other things on your laptop, the connection really should not stall or lag in any way. And then a lot of companies do a test run with you because they want to test that connection. They need to know that all their tools and all their functionality, their devices can run with the internet connection that you have. The next one, a webcam and headset. So your device might have a built-in webcam, but external ones can offer better quality. I find with my laptop, an external webcam is so much better. And in the same way, a headset with a microphone may provide a better experience for you and your students. You also need a comfortable place to sit. Depending on your workload, you might spend a fair amount of time sitting at your desk. I know I do. But make sure that you can maintain good posture and sit comfortably. It's so important. Think about little things like elevating your feet, having a comfortable chair. These are all little investments that you can make to really create the ultimate working environment. And then a professional background. Take note of what your students will see when they're watching your lessons. So a plain background is fine, but be mindful what appears on this background. So think about maybe a blank wall. Think about distracting pictures, things that might move, flash on and off. So just see that the background is clear and only have in the background exactly what you intend to have in the background. And then also your notes and your teaching materials. It's a good idea to have enough space for your teaching notes and materials too. These can help you as you progress through your lessons. Even though your online platforms have got all these amazing note-taking functionalities and facilities, I often use old school notes put up against the board behind me, and this helps. Students will look up, write something down that they might have forgotten, and we move on with the lesson. So this is something important too. And what I feel is that if you're comfortable in your space, if you feel comfortable where you're sat, if you feel comfortable with what's going on around you, the lighting, that sort of thing, then your students, they feel that too. That energy seeps into the lesson and your students are comfortable. Other extras that you can think about is a ring light. If you have light situations like power cuts, you might still need an extra bit of light. So just various little things that you can invest in. And I never ever see these things as an expense, so to speak. They're an investment and they make your lessons better. They add quality to your lessons. So all little things to take into consideration. All right. And the very next thing is something that's so dear to my heart because some of us work with kids, some of us have kids, some of us teach kids, but not only for children, for adults too. And that's privacy and safety online. It's become such a topic in today's life. So, General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, when delivering any kind of class online, you need to take safety and privacy seriously. The General Data Protection Regulation ruling in Europe, for example, means that teachers and their schools have the responsibility to treat their students' data carefully, safely, and with respect. Personal data is another one. So, personal data refers to any details that can identify a teacher, a student, their relatives. This includes, but is not limited to, names, date of birth, address, grades, exam results, reports, and so on. The regulations provide sensible guidance for managing personal data. So, it's well worth reading up on these things and doing a bit of research to protect yourself and also those precious students that you teach. And then sharing photos and video. As all teachers are aware, we generally avoid taking photos and videos of our students, especially the younger learners, unless we have a good reason and parental permission. However, online classes often require the teacher and students to sign in and switch on their webcams. Make sure that you do not capture screenshots or videos of your learners, especially if you make any recordings of your classes. This is something really important. It's something I did not think about at the very beginning of this process. I always thought photos as to what the photos I was sharing and showing in class. But yes, just protecting who's on your screen when they're on your screen is paramount too. And then, of course, what happens in a physical classroom, we also need to consider in an online classroom, bullying and behavior. So, cyberbullying is a particular concern with young learners and teenagers. It can be even more distressing than bullying in the playground or classroom because learners cannot easily escape from an unpleasant or threatening situation like bad messaging. So, when they come into in contact with these, it's not as clear, it's not as black and white, and these bullying messages or these threatening messages, they come through mediums such as WhatsApp or SMS or social media. So work with your students early on in your course to create a classroom of rules and guidelines. This is so very, very important. All right. So again, I think that lots of you will hear that what we teach for the physical classroom is very much the situation in an online classroom too. It's important to create a routine. Do your best to develop a routine in the online classroom. This will help your students feel safe. They'll feel that they're in a safe learning environment, and this makes giving instructions faster and more efficient. For example, you can start with a warmer activity that involves all the students. For example, a game, a review of something done previously, or a few student-centered discussion questions, and then go into your class objectives and review the homework or project work. So a routine gives people, particularly younger learners, security. They know what's coming next. Of course, you're going to dress the lesson up with engaging activities and fun visuals, for example, but the routine is there, which gives them that security as to what's happening next. I know what's coming. I feel safe in this environment. Also, yes, if you're going to have a routine, make sure that you mix study time with energizing games or mini breaks. and have students share their ideas. I once had an online lesson with about 10 young learners, and to just grab their attention, I said, right, go and fetch something that you absolutely love and that you don't like to be without. Go and fetch your favorite thing in your house. And then off they went. They came back with all kinds of interesting things. And then after we did that, we started the lesson. And that gave my online class movement. It gave interest. It got them to share and to relate what was coming to their own lives, their own rooms, their own spaces. There are ways to absolutely make an online lesson engaging and fun, even though we've got to have the parameters perhaps of a routine. All right, and then the next one, delivering instructions. So when it comes to giving instructions, of course, as teachers, this is something that some of us deal with or struggle with on a daily basis. So online teaching lets you deliver instructions to all your students verbally and in written format. You can also ask your students to confirm their understanding in chat boxes and speak to individuals if they're unclear about what to do. Unlike in a physical class, every student can do this at the same time. So you can check that everyone is on track. This is a really, really big advantage of an online lesson. Depending on which platform you use, there's a good chance you'll also be able to share your materials, your documents, your presentation slides, and display, and use other activities like quizzes, games with the class, which help them to follow along with ease. When it comes to delivering instructions, always ask a few instruction checking questions at the end. So this is not at the end of the activity. This should be at the end of giving the instruction. So if you've told them, right, you're going to click on the link, you am going to put you in a breakout room, you and your partner are going to finish the activity in 3 minutes, and you're going to put the virtual hand up when you're ready. So that's a lot. That's a lot to take in, but you can ask a few instruction checking questions. Are you going to work alone or with a partner? And they'll answer. Are you going to work in our classroom or in breakout rooms? In breakout rooms. Where will you find the worksheet? We need to click on the link, teacher. How many minutes do you have? 2 minutes. What do you do when you're done? We put up the virtual hand. Try them. They work and they really eradicate that confusion before your students begin the task. These are particularly helpful. All right. And then, like I said to you, it's an online lesson, yes, but it's still a classroom, and classroom management still comes into play. So online classrooms can be easier to manage, yes, than physical classrooms. It's unlikely that you'll be interrupted by students whispering at the back of the class, my personal favorite, passing notes around or running around. However, you might be interrupted if students have their microphones on while you're speaking, and they can talk to each other via chat box or get distracted with irrelevant online content. So it's always a good idea to have students mute their microphones while you are delivering input and have them close all other windows on their computers so that they only focus on class content. Some platforms will allow you to mute participants' microphones too. And this helps with background noise, with chit chat, parents walking in. This happens sometimes. And this can be a good idea. It ensures that the lesson runs smoothly and avoids unnecessary distractions and background noise. Be sure to let your students know why you are doing this so they don't feel like they've been forcibly silenced. So tell them, I'm going to mute all of you now because I don't want any background noise. I want you to focus, but you will have the chance to talk to me a little bit later on, just so they know you're not having them keep quiet for no reason. Tell students they can ask you questions in the chat box, either publicly or privately, so that they still feel comfortable and supported throughout the lesson. I either ask my students to put their questions in the chat function or write the questions down, and then when it's Q&A, they can type those in. That's also an option for you. Right. So something that I think you've heard me mention before is student engagement. So it's harder to engage with your students when teaching over a webcam connection. It pays to be a little larger than life on camera. So exaggerate your expressions a bit or your tone of voice slightly so that they stay alert and interested in what you have to say. Of course, you're not going to overdo it, but you definitely do work that little bit harder to get their attention and to keep them engaged. You can also keep them on their toes um, by having every single student in class respond to your questions by typing in the chat box. This will ensure that they pay attention um, when you're delivering content. If they know that there is some type of feedback coming and that they're going to have to be accountable for this, they do definitely tune in that bit more. Also, incorporating fun digital tools such as Quizlet or quizzes, interesting names, will also keep your learners engaged. And also, you could use a spinner to nominate students for tasks and asking questions to build a sense of fun and a little bit of suspense. I tend to use this with certain levels that feel a bit more comfortable, and I tend to use it once I've taught content so that I know that if the spinner ends up on someone's name, they're going to feel at least 90% confident enough to deliver the answer. And then remember that just because they're quiet does not mean they're not learning. Students need time to think about things and answer questions. And I will tell you that if you do all these little things, or if you experiment with all these little things, for me, there is very little difference between a physical classroom and an online classroom. The engagement is the same, that level of interaction is the same. And students very often say that in the reviews. They say things like, even though it was an online lesson, I felt like my teacher was right there with me. I felt like my fellow students were right there with me. You'll see that, and it's very, very satisfying. All right. So when it comes to online teaching, I'm just a little passionate because I think that it's a wonderful career option. I've been doing it for so long. I was doing it pre-COVID. I did it during COVID, and I'm still doing it. And it's something I feel I will never stop doing, whether it's from the comfort of my home or whether it's from wherever I'm traveling in the world. It's something that I will certainly want to keep doing. So when it comes to teaching online, remember, your students are still students at the end of the day. They might be on a screen, but they're real people with real needs, with real interests. So speak to them as though they are your students right there in class, in front of you, and your lessons will be absolutely memorable. So again, I apologize for the little bit of a glitch earlier on, but now you've got the opportunity for some questions. Now is your time to ask as many questions as you need to ask. So remember, I did say to you earlier that if you want to ask questions, you can put them on the chat. And now is a good time to put them on because I will be able to see them as they come in. So please, please, please put your questions on the side in the chat function, and I'll get to them as soon as I can. And I see most of you have already put your names. Again, hello to all of you, all four corners of the globe. It's wonderful to see you all, but it's question time. So please put your questions in the chat, and I will happily answer as many of them as I possibly can. All right, so I've already got a question from Geraldine. I'll display that on the screen so that you all can see it. Geraldine asks, how much experience do you feel you need as a teacher before teaching online? So Geraldine, I'm going to tell you a little story, a very short one. My very first teaching job straight after I got my TEFL certificate was an online teacher for a company based in Taiwan. And I had my very, very first lesson online with a wonderful 11-year-old boy. So it was an amazing experience. And in fact, I think that it almost gave me that stepping stone to a real classroom, because by the time I walked into a physical classroom, I already had a bit of experience as to how to speak to students, how to interact with them, how to interact with older students, younger students. It was a wonderful experience. So Geraldine, straight out of TEFL school, straight into my first online class with zero experience. That is a true story. So I hope that helps. I find that a lot of teachers are getting employed even without experience because there is such a huge need around the world for teachers and online teachers. So many students, so many teachers are getting work with little to no experience. And Geraldine, remember that even if you're not a fully experienced teacher, get the experience where you can. Volunteer, teach kids in the neighborhood. If you've got a local community center, go and deliver a few lessons there. Every bit helps. Put that on the CV and start applying for online positions immediately. That's just my 5 cents. All right. And then another question. Oh, I love this one because this happens to everybody. So, Vilsi, thank you for your question. It says, what to do when technology or internet fails during online classes? So, I live in South Africa, and we have this wonderful phenomenon called load shedding, where we lose power. And with power, of course, you have your internet connections or you have your laptop batteries, that sort of thing. I almost suspect it had something to do with it earlier because it's a complete possibility. So what happens there? We'll see. What I can suggest, first and foremost, is to tell your students this. Say to them, my technology might fail, your technology might fail. First, don't panic. Go out of the lesson and just rejoin as you did the first time. And you'll see your students immediately inhale, exhale. Okay, they know that even if they get kicked out of the lesson because of technology, they can come straight back in. So that's the first thing. You do that in housekeeping right at the beginning of your lesson. Then, of course, my suggestion, Vilsi, and I did suggest this earlier, is little financial investments in things like a power bank. Um, I have I'm not very good with technical stuff, but it's a router that keeps going even when there is a technology problem. It keeps going for a good few hours. My laptop is relatively old, so the power bank helps. It keeps me going even if there is a cut in electricity of some kind. And then also internet. Teachers very often have backup. I know a colleague of mine in the UK, immediately, if there's a problem with their Wi Fi, he's got a data plan that he can go onto. Same with me. So it's what we do just to secure those lessons. But I will tell you that first and foremost, tell your students, be transparent. Say to them it might happen. Tell them not to panic. Tell them to leave the lesson and come back in the same way. Then also tell them that this might happen to teacher. I might disappear for a minute or so. Don't panic. I will be back. That's okay. The school or yourself, you can also tell them that every now and then, possibly I won't be back, and that's okay. We will catch up as soon as I can, and you will be notified, just so that there's no panic around it. And you'll see, there'll be no panic with them, and you won't panic either. It'll just take that anxiety out of the whole situation. I hope that helps. All right, so here's a good question. And you know what, Sarah? I love this question because it applies not only for online lessons, but for face to face lessons too. How do you deal with not really knowing much of the native language? Less is more, Sarah. If you don't know the native language, brilliant, because you're not meant to really use it in the class. It gives your students a crutch. And I find it's called total or complete immersion is much better, where they've got to survive in English. If they have a question, they ask you in English. Of course, yes, Sarah, a few survival phrases in their language might help if you're teaching a monolingual class. A few survival phrases, that might help. But at the end of the day, total immersion really is your get out of jail free card because you don't need to speak their language. They need to depend on English with which to communicate. There's quite a bit on our course. In our course about that, to the extent where when you do your assignments, we even say to you, please not to use the language of your students. And the reason is, Sarah, because sometimes you've got students from other countries sitting in that class that do not necessarily speak the language of your other students. So using the language does not really benefit them in any way. All right. And then let's see. All right, so I've got another question here from Eliani, and I think Eliani is from Brazil. And it says, I have been teaching English online for 2 years now, but I feel that my classes are very simple. I need some suggestions on making my classes more interesting. I'm not good with technology. You and me both. But Eliani, I've learned. I've learned, I've experimented, and I've practiced. And in this webinar alone, Eliani, I suggest watch it back because there are a few useful tools and useful platforms that have been mentioned. On our course, you'll also find some. And then remember, some of you have something called a TopUp course. And one of our TopUp courses is all about online teaching. That might be something you want to explore. But yes, Eliani, I felt the same, that my lessons were just sort of stage, done. And then, yes, of course, I started experimenting and researching various online tools and functions that could actually add value to my lessons, particularly for those younger learners that want to be dazzled with a bit of technology. So there are ways of getting around that. Okay, going through the questions, and there are so many. I thank you for them. All right, another question here. Would you spend time marking homework in your online class or in advance? If in advance, do you email or do you use email or a specific platform? A few tips, please. Okay, so I try not to mark homework in my class. Geraldine, and don't quote me on this. I know it's online and it's out there. I'm not really all that keen on homework. So what I tend to do is if they do exercises, I'm into peer correction. I would have them swap homework or I would have them self-correct. And the minute they can and I don't ask them for their scores because if I ask them for their scores, they might cheat, they might lie, they might say I got 10 out of 10 when they got 3 out of 10. But I find other ways of monitoring their progress. I ask them for little writings. We have speaking activities that I can listen to. We have a little listening exercise where they've got to maybe fill in some answers. So when it's homework, I tend to have them do self-correction or peer correction. And I find that homework is not really my way of monitoring their progress. Homework is for self-practice, for self-development, for growing their skill set, whereas my monitoring needs to happen in class time. So don't worry too much about when to mark homework or how much time to take marking it. It's more about what kind of homework you're giving and whether they can do peer correction, self-correction. And then, like I said, if it's homework, maybe a writing that I can mark in my own time and then I can return it to them with a few corrections or some notes, and that is more helpful. Monitoring their spoken abilities in class, for example, their listening ability in class is a lot more useful. So I'm not anti-homework, but I'm definitely not one for sitting there marking homework in class time. That's when they can do error correction by themselves or peer correction. I hope that helps. It helps me. All right, so this is a good, meaty, loaded question. Sarah, thank you. If you're planning to be an independent teacher, how will you know which curriculum to follow? So that's the thing. When you teach independently, you're going to have to come up with your own curriculum. And this is a little difficult, but I think your starting point, your very first starting point, I'm going to type it, and I hope that you can all see it, is a placement test. A placement test, you can Google an online placement test for TEFL, and then give it to your students. This you can have them do in class time. It can even be one where they've got it and you can see the results immediately. So the placement test, first and foremost, Sarah, tells you which level they are meant to be. Once you know what level they are, you can also look at the placement test and you can see what their strengths and what their weaknesses are. So after they do a placement test, give them a speaking test where you ask them a few questions about their lives at present, their lives in the past, what they want going forward. And you don't have to grade your questions too much because remember, part of the test is to see how much they understand and what they know. So once you've done a written placement test, once you've done a speaking placement test, then Sarah, you can start seeing, and okay, this is what the student needs. The student needs focus on tenses. this student will need a little bit of prepositions because they're using prepositions incorrectly. So it's very much based on that placement test. And also, Sarah, write this down, all of you, and needs analysis. So you can even look for one online, check on our course. We have an example there too. And a needs analysis not only tells you what the student wants, but also reveals through the answers what they need. And this helps a lot. This helps you draft that curriculum with ease. Of course, you can fill a few lessons here and there with just some speaking activities so that you can pick up how they're doing from a speaking perspective. But definitely, Sarah, two things you've got to do first: needs analysis and a placement test. You need those two things as a jumping off point. And from there on, you can start building the curriculum, building the exercises, sourcing good resources from the internet and from various course books. That would be my advice there. All right. Okay, so I've got a question here from Onkemetse. And Onkemetse are from Botswana, if I remember correctly. Is it okay to tell students that you don't know if they ask you something that you don't know during Q&A, and maybe tell them that you will answer them during the next online lesson? Absolutely, it's okay. I've done it countless times. We're teachers, and English is an ever-evolving language and system, and we don't know all the answers all the time. So I definitely suggest, rather on Kemetse telling them you don't know, rather than making something up or misleading them or confusing them further. And it's not a bad thing. I often say to students, you know what? I don't know. Teacher doesn't know. So I will check for you and I'll tell you in the next lesson. If, of course, on Kemetse, you're smart, you can also do mini breaks and tell your students, right, I'm going to continue with Q&A after our mini break, and we'll be back in 2 minutes. Everyone can run off, grab a snack, do this, do that, come back in 2 minutes, and then maybe you'll have some time to research the answer. Because sometimes we know the answers, we just need to check on something. Sometimes we know the answers, we just need to confirm something. So you can either have them take a mini break, find the answer, or just tell them, I'm not sure, I will find out for you because I want to give you the right answer. And that's it. I hope that helps. All right. So I have a question here from Maz. Does the TEFL level 5 course qualification allow me to teach at schools? Yes. Face-to-face? Yes. Abroad? Yes. And online too. It absolutely gives you all those skills, all those abilities, and all those accreditations that you can absolutely do all that. I hope that helps. All right. Right. So I have a question, maybe more admin related, but I can definitely answer. Hi there. I'm Iman here from South Africa. Hi, Iman. Does the TEFL level 5 combined course include the 3 top-up courses? So very often, depending on what time you signed up, when you signed up, we might have had a special running where you get a free top-up course. When it's a free top-up course, you won't receive all 3. You'll have a choice. You'll get to choose either business English or teaching online or working with young learners. They're all great courses. They're all packed with additional skills. Because remember, TEFL is teaching English as a foreign language. Teaching English for business, that's very much a specific niche product. Teaching English online, again, it's got additional bits and pieces that you can use. And then also teaching young learners additional resources that you can use. So you will definitely, if you don't have one of these courses as a free course, you can absolutely purchase them. They're not the same price as your main TEFL course. They're considerably less expensive, but packed with useful information. I always tell people that if you want to teach online, if that's the first thing you want to do, and you've got access to a top-up course, definitely go for the Teaching Online top-up course. Absolutely valuable. All right, I've got time maybe for one last question. Okay, I love all your questions. I wish we had plenty of time, but as mentioned, these webinars run on a weekly basis. And if, for example, you want to watch this webinar again, it's available in a few days and you'll be able to watch it back. But here's a question from Harinda. Harinda says, how do you mark them for written tasks when which they email, or is it pen paper test? So this depends on you. You could either have them type out their written exercise and send it back to you, or you could have them write it out in pen and they've got to scan it and send it back to you. When students have online lessons, 9 out of 10, they've got other technical stuff at home, like printers and scanners. They can even use their cell phones and take a picture and send it to you. There are ways of doing that. There are also various monitoring programs that you can use as a teacher. Kids that were learning online for the past few years, there were things like Unlock and all those things where you could monitor them doing the tasks. It is quite intense, and I would say rather do a little bit of research first. But when it comes to submitting written work, it can be something they've typed out, it can be something they've written out. It's completely up to you. Of course, Harinda, if you're working for a school and they demand that it be in a specific format, written out or typed out, that's down to the school. And of course, you've got to adhere to those rules. But if you're working independently, you can have them send it the way they like. I sometimes let them write it out. I sometimes let them type. Sort of depends on how I'm feeling on the day and how much marking I want to do and how much deciphering of handwriting I want to do. All right, I hope that was helpful. All right, so I'm really, really sorry, but we've actually come to the end of our webinar, and I'm just happy that you joined us today. Please remember that you absolutely have access to these webinars at a later stage. We definitely want you to rewatch as many times as you need to. If you cannot find a link to watch all the webinars, send us a ticket on tutor support and we will send you the link to all the webinars. Also, if I've not been able to answer all your valuable questions here today, because believe me, they're valid, I do apologize for that. But again, you can send them to us on tutor support and we'll be more than happy to answer all those important questions that you might have. The last thing that I am going to ask you to do is, of course, to fill in the survey. One, I'm going to be putting it in the chat. You do not have to fill it in right now, but please, when you do have time, save the link and fill in the survey because we need some input. We want to know how we're doing. So absolutely fill in the survey when you have a moment. I'll also be displaying it on my screen, and I really, really hope you'll tune in next time. I am looking forward to seeing each and every one of you again. So thanks and have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for all the thank yous coming through and enjoy. Bye.